So shooting a handgun at 100 yards is no different than shooting a handgun at 10 yards, 25 yards, 50 yards, what have you. The main difference comes from the audience's perception of the difficulty of the shot and also the general entertainment value. The vast majority of people out there that are novice shooters or aren't too familiar with shooting think that the difficulty of shooting comes from distance alone. Now, distance does introduce some difficulties, particularly with vision if you're using iron sights. It can obfuscate the target, it's more out of focus. But for the most part, the difficulty of shooting comes from the size of the target relative to the distance. That's why shooting a playing card in half is an impressive shot no matter the distance, and I don't think most people would be impressed if you were able to hit a fully loaded F250 at 100 yards, even if you were shooting it with a handgun. But the fact of the matter is, general audiences are very impressed by distance shooting, and especially distance shooting with a handgun. Not to mention the entertainment value of distance shooting comes from the fact that people like to see the delay between the gun going off and the target getting hit, and they love seeing the bullet arc into the target, and they love hearing the delay between seeing the target getting hit and it coming back to the microphone. So there's just generally more entertainment value there, even though that the shots you may be taking are not particularly difficult shots. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you, the shots that I take on this channel at 100 yards are not difficult shots, and that's by design. Because when I do these 100-yard shooting challenges, it is not to really challenge myself. It's not as any sort of serious practice. It's to get a video and show it to the internet because I know people are going to like to see it. And the reason why is because when I do this, I'm typically doing them at the very beginning of a practice session or at the very end. So I just want to get them over with and get them done. And I'm also running 2 cameras at the same time, and I'm running separate audio, and there's cars driving back all the time right behind me, and I only have like 30-second intervals between the next car comes and ruins my audio. I want to be able to get the shot off, I want to be able to make a video and then get on with my practice session. I very often use a 1/3 steel torso target, and then I also have an 8-inch steel plate that I use occasionally, and I'll show you just how unimpressive it is to make those shots at 100 yards, because people seem to think that I'm like a really godly shooter or something like that, but I'm really nowhere near the top when it comes to shooting ability. I recently picked up the Olympic sport of 10-meter international air pistol, and I've started shooting that and practicing that recently. And here I have a 10-meter air pistol target. Now, the object of any scoring ring-based sport is, of course, to hit the highest value scoring ring the most amount of times in the allotted number of shots you have. With 10-meter air pistol, you have 60 shots. You're trying to hit the highest value scoring ring of 10, the highest number amount of times in those 60 shots to give you the greatest score and give you the best chance of winning. The size of the 10 ring is 11.5 millimeters. It's about 0.45 inches. And in order to score the 10 ring, your pellet just has to touch the scoring ring. The pellets, of course, are 0.177. So if we add the diameter of the pellet to the size of the scoring ring, we can get an estimation of how difficult it is to shoot a 10 on a 10-meter air pistol target. And I'll go ahead and spare you the math lesson. I've done all the math. It's about a 5.7 minute of angle shot to hit that 10 ring. Now, if you go back to those 2 steel targets that I shoot at 100 yards, one of them, the 8-inch steel plate, is obviously an 8 minute of angle target. The other one, the 1/3 torso target, is 6 inches wide by I think 8 inches or 10 inches tall. So it's a 6 MOA target at best and a 10 MOA target at worst. Now, the great thing about these angular measurements is that the surface area is a function of that angular measurement squared. So if I were to have a 5.7 minute of angle target and an 8 minute of angle target at the same distance, the 8 minute of angle target, even though 8 is 40% more than 5.7, the surface area of that 8 minute of angle target is actually twice as much as that 5.7 minute of angle target. Now, I know that on a good day, I can probably hit this 10 ring 45–50% of the time. On a bad day, maybe a quarter of the time. Now, going back to that 8 minute of angle steel target, having twice the surface area, I know that I can hit that on a bad day, maybe 50% of the time, and on a good day, I can probably hit it 100% of the time. Now, of course, it doesn't always scale linear like that, but for the most part, I hit that target at 100 yards more often than I don't. And people always often ask me, like, how many attempts did that take? How many attempts did that take? You must have recorded this 100 times. And the answer is, I take multiple takes, but it's not because I'm missing the target, it's because of some technical issue. Maybe I forgot to turn on one of the cameras, maybe one of the cameras was out of focus, maybe I forgot to turn on my audio, maybe an F250 drove past while I was taking the shot, ruining my audio. Stuff like that is the main reason why I have to take multiple takes, not because I'm missing the target, usually. And again, just because people seem to think that I'm really, really, really good at shooting, to give you a reference of the level that Olympic level shooters are shooting at, it doesn't matter if it's a bad day, their worst day, they need to hit this 10 ring. 30 shots out of the 60 shots, pretty much, in order to stand a chance of moving out of the qualification round into the finals at one of the major events. And the people that are winning Olympic medals, they're shooting in like the 580s, high 580s. That means they're hitting the 10 ring 35, 40 times, 45 times out of 60. The world record is a 590 out of 600 at the 1988 Olympics, held by Eric Bulging. That means he shot this 10 ring 50 times at a minimum out of 60 shots. So he held a 5.7 minute of angle group over 50 shots with a handgun, one-handed, and that to me is just incredibly impressive, and I'm nowhere near that ability. But let me tell you something, what do you think would get more views on YouTube? Center punching this target or hitting an 8-inch steel plate at 100 yards? And that's just the way it is. People perceive distance as adding some kind of mysterious difficulty to the equation that really doesn't exist. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, I would say 99% of people out there would probably be just as impressed with my shooting ability if I was shooting a full-size torso, an 18-inch wide target, 30 inches tall at 100 yards, because again, people perceive distance as being the difficult thing, not the relative size of the target. Now, the reason why I don't shoot full-size torso targets at 100 yards, even though it'd be way easier, is number one, they're fucking heavy. Number two, they're really expensive, because going back to that surface area and volume, that stuff scales exponentially in regards to the basic dimensions, right? So a full-size steel torso target is going to be exponentially more than a 1/3 torso target. The other thing I like about the torso target is that it's a target that is taller than it is wide. And that's important for two reasons. And number one, it gives me a little bit more margin for error in regards to elevation. Now, I find the most difficult thing of shooting a handgun at 100 yards is not having zeros. I don't really know how much drop there is for every given handgun, every given cartridge, and especially for the slower cartridges like 45 ACP and 38 Special. So by having a target that is taller than it is wide, it gives me more leeway for the vertical stringing I might have at 100 yards. Horizontally, the error is going to be the same, whether it's at 10 meters or 100 yards, and it's going to come entirely from my natural unsteadiness, not from anything ballistics-wise. The other thing about having a target that is taller than it is wide is that it gives you a higher aiming point, which can be, again, really useful for slower cartridges. On the torso target, for example, I can aim at the head with a slower cartridge and have the shots arc into the main body of the target. Really useful if you have a gun with like fixed sights or something that you can't adjust the sights on, or you don't know your dope. Another thing you can do with verbal sleight of hand also has to do with surface area. Squares are going to have more surface area than a circular target. For example, if I say I have an 8-inch target and it's a square target, it's going to have more surface area than an 8-inch target that's a circular target, because you have those corners, right? Even though the width is the same as the diameter of the circle, it just has more surface area because of how the geometry of those shapes work out, right? I think rectangles and torso targets are great for this type of distance shooting, for creating the illusion of shooting something that's more difficult than it actually is. Another really popular target for this type of exhibition long distance shooting are party balloons. And there's a few reasons for that. And number one, again, it's the shape of the balloon. It is taller than it is wide. The other thing is that audiences typically understand the size of a party balloon instinctively. They also come in very bright contrasting colors, makes it easier to see at distance, which that's one of the more difficult things to contend with when shooting at distance, is your ability to actually see the target. So by having a nice bright red or pink balloon or something, makes it easier to see. The other thing that a lot of people do when they're shooting these balloons at distance is they back it with a big steel plate. And not only does that give like an audio response when you hit the target, but it also increases your chances of hitting that balloon, because sometimes you can have the round hit the steel plate, explode into fragments, and those fragments actually pop the balloon. So it increases your chances of hitting the target. The audience is only going to see that balloon pop, and they're going to hear the steel ring, but they're not going to care, because they're going to see the balloon pop, not the steel ringing. They're not going to think about the fragmentation causing that balloon to pop. So that might be another option if you're doing some kind of exhibition shooting and you want to show off to your friends. Shoot a party balloon. And of course, last but not least, pick a day that has favorable weather conditions, particularly when it comes to lighting conditions. Again, vision tends to be one of the difficulties of shooting at distance. And having a super bright sunny day is not always the best shooting conditions light-wise. Bright sunny days can cause you to perceive your iron sights differently, throwing your zeros off at 100 yards. It can also cause there to be really intense contrasting shadows, so really dark shadows and really bright areas of where the sunlight is casting through those dark areas. And all of that can serve to obscure or make it more difficult to see the target and hit the target. The best shooting condition is actually going to be an overcast day that is bright and has no shadows. This has the lowest contrast between dark and light areas. It ensures that your sights are properly lit and evenly lit. It ensures that the target is evenly lit. The only types of lighting conditions I would say to avoid would be shooting in the extremes of either very early morning or late evening, where you have long shadows, lots of very deeply contrasting shadows and light areas that might be casting on your target, and also your eyes are adjusting at the same time. The worst shooting condition is going to be low light conditions, and not only because it makes it way more difficult to shoot the target because you can't see it, but also because your eyes start to dilate when it gets darker, and believe it or not, the difference between your eye being fully dilated and fully choked up on a bright day actually affects your eye's depth of field. The target at 100 yards will appear more blurry when your eyes are fully dilated than on a bright overcast day or a bright sunny day. So avoid shooting in low light conditions for that reason. And the last weather condition to avoid is going to be a windy day. Pretty obvious, but it's not because the wind can blow your bullet off path or anything like that. Most handgun cartridges are moving sufficiently fast enough, and 100 yards is so close that you don't have to worry about wind seriously affecting the flight path of the bullet. What you need to worry about is the wind actually blowing your whole body off the target, which of course is something that we want to avoid. Now, I will say, with all that said, one of the most surprising shots I made at 100 yards, and one of my favorite videos, was the one where I shot the K38 Combat Masterpiece, because I had never planned to shoot that handgun at 100 yards until HR Funk challenged me to shoot it at 100 yards, and I was like, shit, I gotta do it now, because he challenged me to do it. And I'd only shot that gun at 25 yards. It was zeroed for 25 yards, and even then I wasn't super impressed with the groups I was getting with it. So I fully expected to miss like 10, 15, 20 times when I was shooting that gun, especially since the day I picked was like one of the windiest days I've gone out shooting in the last year. And to make matters worse, I had not shot a handgun in like a month prior to that. That was literally my first shot in like a month of not shooting guns at all. So I put that paper behind the target in case I missed, so I could see where I was missing and I could adjust my sights accordingly. I cocked the gun back, I brought it up, and the wind was blowing me all over the target, so I put the gun down, decocked it, then I cocked it again, brought the gun up again, and I took my shot, and it was literally my first shot in a month of not having shot a gun, and I nailed that target at 100 yards with a gun I'd never shot at 100 yards before. Really awesome. I was super happy with that, and I'm glad I was able to capture my genuine reaction. And that day was so windy, it actually ended up blowing over both my cameras at different points of the day. Broke the lens on one of my cameras, unfortunately. But yeah, I was super happy with that. I'm glad I captured that footage. I'm glad I got it over with so quickly so I could get to my main practice session that day. Anyways, that's sort of the showmanship aspect of how I shoot handguns at 100 yards and how you might be able to use some of this information to your advantage in case you want to shoot handguns at 100 yards or challenge your friends or win a bet or something like that. So depending on how this video is received, I might make another video in which I go into the actual mechanics of shooting a handgun at 100 yards, because even though the fundamentals are exactly the same as shooting a handgun at 100 yards versus 10 meters or something like that, there's a couple things that you might want to put more value on when shooting at 100 yards versus shooting at 10 meters or 25 yards or something like that. If that sounds like something you might be interested in, let me know down in the comments below. In any case, thank you for watching, and a special thanks to my channel members that directly support this channel, M. Kosak and Mad Scientist. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day.